The police son was born deaf, until ex-convict pulled out something mysterious and the impossible happened. "Don't you dare touch my son with those filthy hands." Officer Marcus Reed's voice thundered through the living room, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon. The ex-convict didn't flinch. James Carter, 42, remained kneeling beside the boy, his weathered fingers frozen inches from the child's ear. In his palm, something dark and wet glistened under the afternoon light, something no one had ever seen before. "Sir, please," James whispered, his voice steady despite the gun now pointed at his chest. "Your son. There's something inside his ear. Something that shouldn't be there." Marcus's wife, Detective Sarah Reed, stepped between them, her face pale with horror. "Marcus, wait. Look at Tommy." Their 9-year-old son sat motionless on the couch, his eyes wide, tears streaming down his face. But it wasn't fear in those eyes. It was wonder. Then Tommy's lips moved. And sound came out. "Mom." The word was broken, raw, like glass scraping against metal. But it was real. It was his voice. Sarah's legs nearly gave out. Her hand flew to her mouth, stifling a scream that was half joy, half disbelief. Tommy had been born profoundly deaf. 9 years. 9 years of silence. 9 years of specialists saying nothing could be done. Marcus's weapon lowered slowly, his hands trembling. What did you just do?" James remained calm, almost too calm for someone who just performed the impossible. He opened his palm fully, revealing the dark, slug-like creature writhing in his hand. "I pulled out what was stealing his hearing." 3 hours earlier, James Carter had been released from prison exactly 6 days ago after serving 8 years for a crime he didn't commit. The system had chewed him up and spit him out with nothing but a bus ticket and $47 in gate money. No apologies. No compensation. Just freedom that tasted like ashes. He'd found work doing yard maintenance in a quiet suburban neighborhood, trying to rebuild a life that felt increasingly pointless. At 42, he was too old to start over and too young to give up. The Reed family had hired him to fix their fence and trim the hedges. Standard suburban work for standard suburban people. Except Marcus Reed wasn't standard. He was a police officer, the kind who'd probably arrested men like James 100 times without asking questions. James had noticed the boy on his first day. Tommy sat on the porch steps, arranging toy cars in perfect rows, never looking up when James worked nearby. At first, James thought the kid was just shy. Then he noticed the hearing aids. Then the way Sarah communicated with him using signs. Deaf kid. Rich family. Probably spent a fortune on treatments that didn't work. James knew about things that didn't work. He'd spent 8 years screaming his innocence to people who stopped listening. But something about Tommy bothered him. Not the deafness itself, but the way the boy kept touching his ear. Wincing. Scratching at it when he thought no one was watching. James had seen that before. In prison. An inmate named Rodriguez had the same problem. Constant ear pain, hearing loss that seemed to worsen each month. The prison doctors did nothing. Said it was probably an infection, threw some antibiotics at him, and moved on. Until Rodriguez collapsed during yard time, screaming, blood pouring from his ear. They'd rushed him to the hospital. What they found inside his ear canal made the news. A rare parasitic organism, foreign to North America, likely contracted during Rodriguez's deployment in Southeast Asia years before. It had been feeding, growing, blocking his hearing slowly over time. When James saw Tommy touching his ear that same way, something clicked. On his 3rd day working at the Reed house, James noticed Tommy sitting alone in the backyard, his face twisted in pain, tears running silently down his cheeks. The boy was clawing at his ear desperately. Sarah was inside on a work call. Marcus was at the station. The nanny had stepped out to grab groceries. James approached slowly, carefully. He knelt down and gently touched Tommy's shoulder. The boy jumped, startled, then relaxed slightly when he recognized the yard worker. James pointed to his own ear, then to Tommy's, his expression asking a silent question. "Does it hurt?" Tommy nodded frantically, fresh tears spilling over. James held up one finger. "Wait." He pulled a small penlight from his toolkit, something he carried for checking dark corners of fences and gates. He gestured for Tommy to tilt his head. The boy hesitated, but the pain was too much. He obeyed. James shined the light into Tommy's ear canal and his blood ran cold. Deep inside, something moved. Something alive. Something that absolutely should not exist inside a human child. His hands had started shaking then, the same way they were shaking now as Marcus Reed stared at the creature in his palm. "You need to tell me exactly what you saw," Marcus said, his voice dangerous and low. "And you need to tell me why an ex-con thinks he can perform medical procedures on my son." James met his eyes without fear. After 8 years of being guilty until proven innocent, he'd stopped caring what cops thought. "Your son wasn't born deaf, Officer Reed," James said quietly. "He was made deaf." Sarah's face went white. "What are you talking about?" James looked at Tommy, who was touching his ears gently, his eyes still wide with shock at the sounds flooding his brain for the first time in his memory. "Someone put that thing in his ear when he was a baby," James continued. "And I think I know who." If this story is already making you feel something powerful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happens next will shake you to your core. Marcus slammed his fist on the kitchen table. "You're telling me someone deliberately infected my son? That's insane." James placed the creature, now dead and still, on a paper towel. Under the harsh kitchen lights, it looked even more grotesque. Dark, segmented, with tiny hair-like projections along its body. "I'm telling you what I saw in prison," James replied calmly. "And I'm telling you that thing doesn't just appear naturally in a newborn's ear canal." Sarah was already on her phone, frantically searching medical databases. Her hands shook as she scrolled. "Marcus, he might be right. There are documented cases of Elurostrongylus parasites being used in— Oh my God. Used in what?" Marcus demanded. Sarah's face had gone from pale to gray. "In experimental research. Military applications. There was a declassified program in the 90s where," she stopped, looking at Tommy playing in the living room, oblivious to the conversation, "where they tested biological agents on subjects without consent." Marcus shook his head violently. "No. Absolutely not. Tommy was born in a private hospital. Top-rated facility. We had the best prenatal care money could buy." "St. Catherine's Medical Center?" James asked quietly. Both parents turned to him sharply. "How did you know that?" Sarah's detective instincts kicked in immediately. James pulled out his phone, a cheap burner he'd bought after release, and opened a saved news article. "Because the same hospital was flagged in a lawsuit 8 years ago. Right before I went to prison." He slid the phone across the table. The headline read, "St. Catherine's Medical Director under investigation for unauthorized research protocols." Sarah grabbed the phone, reading rapidly. "Dr. Harrison Westbrook, allegations of conducting unapproved trials on newborns. Dismissed due to lack of evidence. Currently serving as," her voice caught. "Currently serving as Chief of Pediatric Research at St. Catherine's." Marcus's jaw clenched. That's the doctor who diagnosed Tommy. The one who said his deafness was genetic and untreatable. The room went silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. James spoke carefully. "When I was arrested, I was working as a medical supply courier. I delivered packages to St. Catherine's twice a week. One night, I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. Westbrook receiving unmarked containers from a pharmaceutical van. No paperwork. No hospital logs. When I asked my supervisor about it, he told me to forget what I saw." He paused, the memory still bitter. 2 days later, I was arrested for possession of stolen hospital narcotics. Drugs I'd never seen before. Found in my delivery van during a random inspection that wasn't random at all." Sarah studied him with new intensity. "You're saying you were framed." "I'm saying I asked the wrong questions about the wrong person," James replied. "And I spent 8 years paying for it while Westbrook kept his job, his reputation, and apparently his experiments." Marcus stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. "Even if what you're saying is true, why Tommy? Why my son?" James had wondered the same thing for the past hour. Then he'd remembered something Sarah had mentioned casually during his first day of work. "Your wife testified against a pharmaceutical company 3 years ago, didn't she?" James asked. "Something about falsified drug trials?" Sarah froze. "How do you know about that?" "You mentioned it when we talked about the garden." You said you were working from home more because your cases made you enemies. Marcus stopped pacing. His face had changed from anger to something darker, realization. Meridian Pharmaceuticals, Sarah whispered. I was the lead investigator on a case that cost them $200 million in settlements. Their CEO went to prison. Their research division was shut down. And their chief medical consultant was. James prompted gently. Harrison Westbrook, Sarah finished, her voice hollow. He was their expert witness. I destroyed his testimony on the stand. Made him look like a fool in front of the jury. Marcus grabbed his keys. I'm bringing that bastard in right now. You can't, James said firmly. You have no evidence. That creature is dead. Any half-decent lawyer will say I planted it. You're a cop accusing a respected doctor based on the word of an ex-convict. How do you think that plays out? Marcus wanted to argue, but he knew James was right. His hand trembled on the keys. There's another way, James continued. But you're not going to like it. Sarah leaned forward. What way? Westbrook doesn't know Tommy can hear now. He doesn't know that thing was removed. If he's been monitoring Tommy's condition like any good doctor would, he'll want to schedule a follow-up soon. You want us to let him near our son again? Marcus's voice was dangerous. I want you to catch him admitting what he did, James corrected. Let him examine Tommy. Record everything. Let him think his experiment is still running. People like Westbrook, people who think they're untouchable, they get arrogant. They slip. Sarah was already thinking like a detective again. We'd need proper surveillance equipment. Audio and video. Legally obtained consent for recording. If we do this wrong, anything we capture is inadmissible. Then we do it right, James said. But we do it fast. Because I guarantee you, the moment Westbrook realizes Tommy can hear, he'll disappear. People with his connections don't go down easy. Marcus stared at James for a long moment. Why are you helping us? You don't know us. You owe us nothing. James thought of Rodriguez screaming in the prison yard. He thought of 8 years stolen from his life. He thought of all the questions no one had bothered to ask because he was just another convict, another nobody whose voice didn't matter. Because somebody needs to ask the right questions this time, James said quietly. And maybe somebody needs to actually listen to the answers. Tommy wandered into the kitchen, holding his toy car. He looked up at his parents, then at James. For the first time in his life, he spoke without signing first. Why is everyone scared? His voice was still rough, unpracticed, but it was the most beautiful sound Sarah had ever heard. She pulled him into her arms, tears streaming down her face. Over Tommy's head, she locked eyes with James and nodded once. They were going to bring Westbrook down. But none of them knew that Westbrook had already been watching. That he'd installed monitoring devices in the Reed home months ago. That he'd heard every word of their conversation. And that he was already setting his own plan in motion. The next morning, James arrived at the Reed house earlier than usual. Sarah met him at the door, her detective badge clipped to her belt, dark circles under her eyes. He called, she said without greeting. Westbrook. 20 minutes ago. Wants to schedule Tommy's quarterly evaluation. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. James felt his pulse quicken. That's fast. Too fast, Sarah agreed. Marcus thinks it's suspicious. I think it's perfect. She led him inside where Marcus sat at the dining table surrounded by equipment, tiny cameras, audio recorders, wireless transmitters. A tech specialist from Sarah's unit, a young Asian woman named Kim, was setting up a laptop. This is off the books, Marcus said, not looking up. Kim's doing this as a favor. If this goes wrong, her career is over too. Kim didn't seem concerned. If half of what you told me is true, the doctor needs to be buried under the prison. I've seen the court records from James's case. The evidence against him appeared out of nowhere. No chain of custody. No witnesses. Textbook frame job. James felt something unfamiliar, validation. Someone in law enforcement actually believed him. We're going to wire the examination room, Kim continued, pulling up a floor plan on her laptop. 4 cameras, 3 audio sources. Everything encrypted and backed up to a secure server in real time. Even if he finds the equipment, we'll have the footage. Sarah smiled grimly. Tommy's a minor receiving medical care in our home. We have every legal right to record his treatment. Westbrook will be informed there are security cameras in the house, standard procedure. He won't know about the hidden ones. Marcus finally looked at James. You were right. I pulled Westbrook's financials this morning through a contact at the FBI. 3 months after Tommy was born, he received a $500,000 wire transfer from an offshore account, labeled as consulting fees. Meridian Pharmaceuticals? James guessed. Can't prove it yet, but the timing matches. Marcus pulled up a document on his phone. Westbrook has been the primary physician for 7 other children diagnosed with congenital deafness. All born at St. Catherine's. All within a 2-year window. Sarah's face hardened. 7 children. 7 families destroyed. 6 families, Kim corrected quietly. 1 of those children died. Official cause, SIDS. But the parents tried to sue, claiming negligence. Case was dismissed. The room fell silent. James felt rage building in his chest, the same rage that had sustained him through 8 years of injustice. But now it had direction. Purpose. We need one of those families to talk, he said. Someone who suspected something was wrong. Someone who'll testify. Marcus shook his head. Already tried. They're all terrified. Westbrook has connections to every major law firm in the state. What about the parents whose child died? James asked. Kim pulled up a file. Robert and Linda Chun. They live about 40 minutes from here. After their daughter May died, they started a blog documenting everything. Doctor's appointments, medications, suspicious interactions. It got taken down after Westbrook threatened legal action. But I found archived copies. She turned the laptop toward them. The blog was heartbreaking. Pages of desperate parents questioning why their daughter's condition kept worsening despite treatment. The final post was dated 3 days before May's death. Dr. Westbrook changed her medication again. He says it's necessary, but something feels wrong. He won't answer our questions anymore. He just tells us to trust him. But I don't. I don't trust him at all. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. We're getting this monster. I'll visit the Chens, James said. Cop shows up, they'll think it's official business, get scared. Ex-con with nothing to lose? Different conversation. Sarah studied him for a moment, then nodded. Go. But take this. She handed him a small recording device disguised as a pen. Just in case they say something useful. The Chin house was small, tired-looking, with a garden that had once been loved but now grew wild. James knocked 3 times before the door opened slightly, a chain lock still engaged. Robert Chen's face appeared in the gap. He was younger than James expected, maybe mid-30s, but his eyes looked ancient. Not interested in whatever you're selling, he said flatly. I'm not selling anything, Mr. Chun. My name is James Carter. I'm here about Dr. Harrison Westbrook. The door started to close. He killed your daughter, James said quickly. And he's still killing children. The door stopped. Robert's breathing became audible through the gap. Who are you? Someone he destroyed years before he got to May. Can I come in? 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. The chain rattled. The door opened. Linda Chun sat on the couch inside, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders despite the warm day. Photos of May covered every surface, a shrine to a life cut impossibly short. James sat across from them and told them everything. Tommy. The parasite. His own frame-up. The other families. The offshore payments. When he finished, Linda spoke for the first time. Her voice was barely a whisper. We knew. We always knew something was wrong. But everyone said we were just grieving parents looking for someone to blame. Even our own families stopped believing us. Robert's hands trembled as he pulled out a box from beneath the couch. Inside were medical records, handwritten notes, printed emails. We kept everything, he said. Every lie. Every time he changed his story. Every appointment where he seemed more interested in observing May than helping her. We knew. But we couldn't prove it. Now you can, James said gently. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., Westbrook is examining another child. We're recording everything. If he slips, if he says anything incriminating, we have him." Linda looked at her husband. Something passed between them, years of grief, rage, and helplessness finally finding an outlet. "We'll testify," Robert said firmly. "Whatever you need." James felt something shift in his chest. For 8 years, he'd been alone in his fight. Now he had allies. Now he had purpose. He stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. Did Westbrook ever mention other research? Other projects? Linda's face went pale. Once. Near the end. May was crying, in so much pain. "I was begging him to help her. He said," her voice broke. "He said pain was just data. That her suffering was contributing to something bigger than she could understand." James's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about revenge or money. Westbrook was a true believer. The most dangerous kind of monster. Dr. Harrison Westbrook arrived at exactly 2 p.m., carrying his leather medical bag and wearing his trademark confident smile. He was 58, silver-haired, with the kind of face that inspired trust, which made him infinitely more dangerous. "Sarah Marcus, always a pleasure," he said warmly, shaking their hands. "And young Tommy. Let's see how you're doing today." Tommy sat on the examination table in the converted home office, his parents on either side. Hidden in the ceiling vent, bookshelf, and lamp were 3 cameras. 2 audio recorders sat disguised as decorative items. In the next room, Kim monitored everything on her laptop while James watched through a crack in the door. Westbrook pulled out his otoscope, the same instrument he'd used dozens of times before. "Open wide for me, Tommy. Let's check those ears." Tommy obeyed, his face neutral. He'd been coached carefully. Act normal, don't reveal you can hear, let the doctor talk. Westbrook peered into Tommy's right ear, his expression clinical. Then he checked the left. His hand froze for just a fraction of a second. His smile flickered. "Everything looks normal," he said slowly. But his eyes had changed. They were calculating now, suspicious. He checked again, taking longer this time. James could see the confusion building behind the professional mask. "His ear canal seemed clearer than usual," Westbrook said carefully. "Have you been using any new treatments? Different drops perhaps?" "Just what you prescribed," Sarah lied smoothly. "Why? Is something wrong?" No. Just unexpected improvement." Westbrook set down his otoscope, but his hands weren't steady anymore. "I'd like to run some additional tests at the hospital. More thorough equipment." "Is that necessary?" Marcus asked, his cop voice steady. "You've always said home examinations were sufficient." Westbrook's smile was tight now. Standard protocol. Just being thorough. That's when Tommy made his move. The boy had been holding a toy car, and now he accidentally dropped it. The car clattered loudly against the hardwood floor. Tommy's head turned toward the sound. It was a tiny movement, instinctive, barely noticeable. But Westbrook noticed. His face went white. "Tommy," he said sharply. "Did you hear that?" The room held its breath. Tommy looked confused, signing instead of speaking, "Hear what?" But the damage was done. Westbrook's eyes darted between the parents and the child, his mind racing through implications. "How long?" he whispered. "How long what, doctor?" Sarah's voice was ice. Westbrook stood abruptly, grabbing his medical bag. "I need to leave. Family emergency. We'll reschedule." Marcus moved to block the door. "Sit down, Dr. Westbrook." "Excuse me." "I said sit down." Marcus's hand rested casually near his service weapon. "We have questions." Westbrook's professional mask cracked completely. Underneath was something cold and calculating. "I don't know what you think you're doing, Officer Reed, but I'm leaving." "Move." "Tell us about the parasite," Sarah said quietly. Westbrook froze. "Tell us about the offshore payments. About Meridian Pharmaceuticals. About the 7 other children." Sarah's voice was deadly calm. "Tell us about May Chun." At May's name, something in Westbrook's expression shifted from fear to rage. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. No idea the importance of this research. Research. Marcus's voice cracked with fury. You call torturing children research? I call it progress. Westbrook shouted, his composure finally shattering. Do you know how many deaf children exist in this world? Millions. And you people waste billions on hearing aids, cochlear implants, sign language programs, accommodating disability instead of curing it. By infecting babies? Sarah's voice shook with barely controlled rage. Westbrook laughed bitterly. The parasites were never meant to be permanent. They were supposed to stimulate neural pathway development, force the auditory system to compensate, to evolve. Remove them at the right time, and theoretically, hearing would be enhanced beyond normal levels. Theoretically. James stepped into the room, unable to stay hidden any longer. You didn't know if it would work? Westbrook's eyes widened in recognition. You. The courier. I thought you were rotting in prison where you belonged. Where you put me, James replied coldly. Because I saw too much. You saw nothing. You understood nothing. Westbrook was fully unhinged now, years of secrets spilling out. Meridian was going to revolutionize auditory treatment. We were going to be billionaires. But then he pointed at Sarah with shaking finger. She destroyed everything with her self-righteous testimony. So you targeted my son, Sarah whispered. Revenge. Revenge. Research. Both. Westbrook shrugged. Tommy was perfect. Young enough for the parasite to integrate, healthy enough to survive the process. And watching you suffer while your child remained deaf, knowing I caused it? That was simply a bonus. Marcus moved fast, but Sarah was faster. She held up her phone, the recording app clearly visible and running. Every word, she said softly. Every confession. All recorded. Westbrook's face went from red to gray. You can't. Home security system, Marcus said, pointing to the visible camera in the corner. You were informed when you entered. Everything that happens in this house is recorded. It's completely legal. Kim emerged from the next room, her laptop open. Already uploaded to 3 secure servers. FBI, State Police, and Internal Affairs. Even if you run, it's over. Westbrook stumbled backward, his legs hitting the chair. He collapsed into it, his entire body sagging. The child, James said quietly. May. What happened to her? Westbrook's voice was hollow. The parasite grew too large. Migration into the brain tissue. I tried to remove it, but there were complications. You killed her during an unsanctioned procedure and covered it up, Sarah said, her voice breaking. She was 2 years old. She was a setback, Westbrook said numbly. But the research continued. Had to. Too much invested. Too much potential. The front door burst open. Robert and Linda Chen stood there, having been waiting outside as planned. Linda's face was streaming with tears. You monster, she whispered. You murdered our baby for money. Westbrook looked up at them, and for the first time, something like regret crossed his face. But it vanished quickly, replaced by defiance. I'm a doctor, he said. I was trying to help. No, James said firmly. You were playing God. And now you're going to pay for it. Marcus pulled out his handcuffs. Harrison Westbrook, you're under arrest for child endangerment, medical malpractice, conspiracy, and the murder of Mei Chun. You have the right to remain silent. As Marcus read him his rights, Westbrook's eyes met James's one last time. You think this vindicates you? Westbrook spat. You're still an ex-con. Still nobody. James smiled coldly. Maybe. But I'm a nobody who just took down a monster. That's enough for me. 6 months later, James stood in front of St. Catherine's Medical Center, but this time he wasn't delivering packages or running from accusations. He was there as a witness, watching as federal agents carried boxes of evidence out through the main entrance. The investigation had exploded far beyond anyone's expectations. Westbrook's arrest had triggered a cascade of revelations, falsified research data, bribed hospital administrators, dozens of families affected across multiple states. Meridian Pharmaceuticals' former executives were facing criminal charges. St. Catherine's entire board had resigned. Sarah appeared beside him, holding 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need this. James accepted gratefully. How many families total? 23 children identified so far, Sarah replied, her voice heavy. 11 of them still living. The FBI is coordinating removals of the parasites with actual medical experts now. Tommy's surgeon says they should all recover fully. Should, James repeated quietly. Better odds than they had before. Sarah looked at him carefully. The DA's office called me this morning. Your conviction is being officially overturned. Full exoneration. They're offering compensation. James had been waiting for this news for 6 months, but now that it arrived, he felt strangely empty. Money doesn't give me back 8 years. No, Sarah agreed. But it gives you a future. Marcus emerged from the hospital entrance, Tommy bouncing alongside him. The boy's hearing was still adjusting, but he wore his first pair of proper hearing aids now, not to restore hearing, but to help process the overwhelming world of sound he'd never experienced. James. Tommy ran forward and hugged him tightly. His speech had improved dramatically with therapy. Dad says we're getting ice cream. You have to come. James looked down at the boy who'd changed everything. I don't know if I should. Please. Tommy's eyes were bright, alive in a way they'd never been before. You're my hero. Hero. James had spent 8 years being called a criminal, a convict, a felon. He'd forgotten that words could mean something different. Okay, he said softly. Ice cream sounds good. At the ice cream shop, Tommy chattered excitedly about school, about the sounds he'd discovered, about the music class he joined. Marcus and Sarah watched him with expressions of profound gratitude and relief. We owe you everything, Marcus said quietly. I know that's inadequate, but it's true. James shook his head. You would have figured it out eventually. No, Sarah interjected firmly. We wouldn't have. We were too close to it, too trusting of the system. You saw what we couldn't because you'd already learned not to trust anything at face value. James looked at Tommy, who was now making faces at his reflection in a spoon, delighted by the distorted image and the metallic sounds it made when he tapped it. The other families, James said. The ones we found. Are they okay? Sarah pulled out her phone and showed him a photo. It was a group picture, dozens of families standing together in what looked like a community center. Children of various ages, some with hearing aids, some signing, all smiling. A banner behind them read, Westbrook Survivors Support Network. Robert and Linda Chen started it, Sarah explained. Support group for all the affected families. Medical coordination, legal assistance, counseling. They asked about you, actually. Wanted to know if you'd speak at their next meeting. James stared at the photo. All those lives, interconnected by trauma but now finding strength in community. What would I even say? The truth, Marcus suggested. That justice isn't always fast. That the system fails people every day. But that doesn't mean we stop fighting. 2 weeks later, James stood in front of 40 people in that same community center. His hands were shaking, his throat dry. He'd faced down hostile prisoners, corrupt cops, and years of isolation. But speaking to people who looked at him with hope rather than suspicion was somehow more terrifying. I'm not good at speeches, he began awkwardly. I'm better at keeping my head down and surviving. That's what prison teaches you, survive, don't trust, don't hope. He saw Linda Chun in the front row, her hand clasped in Robert's, both nodding encouragement. But Tommy Reed taught me something different. He taught me that sometimes keeping your head down means ignoring what's right in front of you. Sometimes survival isn't enough. Sometimes you have to risk everything for something bigger than yourself. His voice grew stronger. Dr. Westbrook took things from all of us. Time. Trust. Innocence. Some of us lost even more. And the system that should have protected us either failed or actively helped him. That's the truth. That's the reality we all live with. He paused, looking at each face, survivors, fighters, people who'd been broken but refused to stay broken. But here's what he didn't take, our ability to fight back. Our ability to demand justice. Our ability to protect each other when the system won't. That's what this room represents. That's what matters now. The applause started small but grew until the entire room was standing. James felt tears burning his eyes for the first time in 8 years. That evening, James sat in his new apartment, modest but clean, paid for with part of his compensation settlement. His phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Carter? This is attorney Rebecca Walsh. I represent 3 families from the Westbrook case who are interested in filing civil suits. Your testimony will be crucial. We'd also like to discuss hiring you as a consultant. Consultant for what? Medical facility oversight. Your unique perspective, someone who understands both the medical supply chain and how institutional corruption operates, is invaluable. The pay is substantial, and frankly, we need people who won't look away when something seems wrong. James thought about 8 years of being invisible. Of being nobody. Of being the person everyone assumed was guilty. I'll do it, he said. But not for the money. For the families. So this never happens again. That's exactly why we want you, Mr. Carter. 1 year after Westbrook's arrest, James attended the man's sentencing. The courtroom was packed with families, journalists, and medical professionals. Westbrook sat hunched at the defense table, his silver hair now mostly gray, his confident demeanor completely destroyed. James Carter didn't just save Tommy Reed. He saved himself. And that might be the most important miracle of all. The judge's voice was stern. Dr. Westbrook, you violated the sacred trust between physician and patient in the most egregious manner imaginable. You transformed healing into harm, science into torture, and children into experiments. This court sentences you to 45 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Westbrook's lawyer started to object, but the doctor waved him off. He stood slowly, looking across the courtroom until his eyes found James. I hope you're satisfied, Westbrook said, his voice bitter. James stood as well. I'm not satisfied. Satisfaction would require those children never suffering in the first place. What I am is relieved. Relieved that you can't hurt anyone else. That's not the same thing. As guards led Westbrook away, Tommy tugged on James's sleeve. Is the bad man gone forever? Yes, James said, kneeling to the boy's level. Forever. Tommy smiled, then signed something carefully. James had learned basic sign language over the past year specifically to communicate with the deaf children in the survivor network. What did he say? Sarah asked, her own signing still imperfect. James felt his throat tighten with emotion. He said, "Thank you for teaching me that heroes don't need capes. They just need to care." Dear viewers, this story isn't just about one corrupt doctor or one saved child. It's about how easily we trust systems, how quickly we dismiss people society has labeled as unworthy, and how justice sometimes comes from the most unexpected places. James Carter lost 8 years of his life to a system that valued power over truth. But those 8 years taught him to question everything, to look deeper, to never assume that official answers are complete answers. That skepticism, born from injustice, became the tool that saved Tommy and exposed a monster. The real miracle wasn't removing a parasite from a child's ear. The real miracle was that James, after everything done to him, still chose to help. He could have walked away. He could have decided the world owed him nothing. Instead, he gave everything he had left to give. Sometimes the people the system breaks become the strongest advocates for fixing it. Sometimes the ones labeled criminal are actually the most committed to justice. And sometimes the hero of the story is the person everyone else overlooked. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about justice, redemption, and who deserves our trust, please subscribe to this channel. Share this story. Let it remind you that every person has value, every voice deserves to be heard, and every wrong can be made right if enough people refuse to look away.